Hello everyone! Welcome back to my Ant Tribe Diary. Today, I want to share an unexpected experience with you all. Yesterday, I fed my ants as usual, which should have been a normal and correct operation. However, an unexpected event happened during this seemingly routine task. The next morning, I discovered that the test tube was filled with a large amount of water, and the ant nest was flooded. If not addressed promptly, this could lead to the destruction of the ant colony and their eggs. This situation made me feel quite helpless and reminded me how important every little detail is when raising ants. After realizing what had happened, I understood that the test tube environment was no longer suitable for the ants. The accumulated water not only endangered the survival of the ants but also threatened their reproduction. I immediately decided to intervene and act fast. I grabbed a backup box I had prepared earlier and started looking for a new, safer home for the ants. To help the ants move to a new environment, I selected a new test tube and placed it beside the old ant nest, hoping to provide them with a drier and more comfortable place to live. Once I had prepared the new test tube, I observed that two worker ants were the first to find the new nest. They quickly assessed that the new test tube was a better environment than their current one, so they returned to the old nest to inform the others. However, I noticed that the worker ants did not immediately begin to move. Instead, one of the worker ants stayed behind to continue exploring the surroundings. I began to feel anxious as I wanted them to move quickly, but it seemed like the ants were taking their time. Meanwhile, in the new test tube, I saw one worker ant busily collecting cotton. It seemed to be planning to use the cotton to absorb the moisture in the test tube. Watching the worker ant diligently gather cotton was amusing. It reminded me of employees working hard at the office. While their efforts were admirable, I couldn't help but feel a bit frustrated as the new test tube, though drier, still had moisture that wasn't ideal for the ants. As time went on, I decided to speed things up and move the queen ant as well. After some effort, I managed to get the queen into the new test tube. Once she was transferred, she began to shake her body violently. I wondered whether she was releasing pheromones or simply trying to dry off the moisture on her body. Regardless of the reason, it was clear that the queen was adjusting to the new environment, and I was relieved to see her move. However, the worker ants seemed unaware that the queen had already left the old nest. They continued to care for the eggs inside the old nest and showed no signs of wanting to move. At this point, I noticed that the escape barrier in the box wasn't fully intact. I quickly added more escape-proof liquid to the spots that were missing, ensuring that the ants wouldn't be able to escape. Despite my efforts, the worker ants persisted in the damp and flooded test tube, continuing to care for the eggs. I was getting increasingly worried as the moisture in the test tube could easily drown the eggs, so I had to act fast. Seeing that the eggs might be at risk due to excessive moisture, I decided to take more direct action. I carefully emptied the ants from the test tube, trying my best not to harm them, and then began moving the eggs to a safer, drier environment. Initially, the ants were panicked, running in all directions, seemingly confused by the sudden change. I could only watch quietly as I waited for them to calm down. After some time, the ants finally settled down and resumed their work. Although they had been startled, their instincts kicked in. Some of the worker ants began moving the eggs to a darker place, not rushing to bring them back to the new nest right away. The reason was clear: the eggs were too wet and it wasn't safe to bring them back to the nest immediately. So, the ants carefully placed the eggs in a temporary holding area, waiting for the moisture to evaporate before moving them back to the nest. After the worker ants had carefully arranged the eggs, they finally began their search for the queen. The worker ants quickly found her in the new nest and began to communicate with her. Even though they didn't immediately move the eggs back to the nest, they first gathered the other worker ants outside to continue sorting the eggs. This process of back and forth continued for quite a while, and my filming equipment ran out of battery. Despite that, I didn't want to stop recording the ants' actions. When I recharged the camera, the ants had finally moved the eggs back to the new nest. The new test tube environment seemed to be working out well for them, and the queen started taking care of the eggs there. I could finally breathe a sigh of relief as the ants had stabilized and adapted to their new home. At the same time, I also moved the other ant colonies into new boxes and replaced the test tubes where necessary. For those that couldn't be moved, I cleaned the moisture out of the test tubes to ensure a better living environment for them. Through this transfer and relocation experience, I learned the challenges and complexities of ant keeping. Especially when it comes to the health of the queen and the survival of the eggs, any negligence can lead to disastrous consequences. Although this experience made me anxious, it also provided valuable lessons. Without timely intervention, the ant colony could have been wiped out. Going forward, I will be more careful and ensure that the ants' living environment remains stable and safe. And that's all for today's Ant Tribe story. Every day brings new challenges and stories waiting to be discovered. If you also enjoy the fascinating world of ants, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.